So it's
pretty wild.
I remember the thing that happened with that one for me was it was the last time I thought my heroes were perfect. And like I was a little too young for OJ Simpson to be a huge football hero of mine, but like he was in a bunch of movies that I liked, and he was
He sure was only a Naked Gun.
he was Norbert.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you son of a bitch.
Frankie, your energy sounds pretty good to our listeners, but before this recording started, Frank had some very sad news to share with me. Being a trading card enthusiast, we had a bit of a break-in at the Cava compound.
It's a complete true story, and it just sucks. It just feels just getting stolen from kind of sucks. It's gutting. It just.
So what happened? Like what?
So on Monday I came in and Carla noticed that there were some cards on the floor, and I had been here Sunday afternoon and I had noticed them. So we're like, that doesn't seem right. So we went and paid attention to it, and we're like, crap, someone came in, took some stuff. So we've gone through video footage and all kinds of other stuff to kind of see if we, can we find where, what's the issue? So we did that for Sunday and Monday, and then we made sure we had a locksmith come and make sure the lock couldn't be tampered with and everything was set. And then this morning, something else, someone's like, they broke the back door. And I'm like, what do you mean they broke the back door? Someone came up and broke our back door that we just had the locksmith fixed 3 days earlier. And boom, I was like, oh shit. I went and looked in my drawer, and they came back and took more of my stuff. So it's just frustrating. I mean, I probably had 7 Ronnie Lots here. 3 rookie cards that were PSA 10s.
3 Ronnie Lot PSA 10s?
Yeah.
That's big time. I only have 1. I'm jealous.
And I had my Lawrence Taylors, and I just had some stuff that was fun. So like
football stuff that you've bought recently.
Yeah, actually it's all a year or two old at this point. It wasn't terribly new. But it was
and you weren't in high school when you owned it. That's what I meant.
No. I bought it since we've gotten into this. But kind of what we're going to talk about today with the Seinfeld method, it's things that you do over time consistently. I mean, I find myself buying 3 to 5 really nice cards a month for when did we start doing this? 2 years ago, year and a half ago?
Yeah.
And in so doing, it's I got some really cool stuff. My 1970 rookie OJ Simpson, this is timely. OJ Simpson rookie was stolen, and it's a PSA 10 from Kellogg. I think it's got a population of like 7. So it just sucks.
Where were you when the Bronco was rolling down the street when old OJ first got busted?
So for those, I think the delineator is 40 years old, and for people who are over 40 years old, we all know where we were. For me, it was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year at the University of Florida. I was home in Coral Springs. I was working at the Coral Springs Outback. And it started, late in the day, like 7, 8 o'clock Eastern time was my guess is when it started, maybe a little later. So my shift had ended, and then I went over to my buddy's house, and we sat on the couch and watched it. Zupan had gotten hurt that summer or that year. So we were always at his house. So me, Nickel, that whole group, we watched it together.
I saw it. That came on the day before our state championship baseball game. My entire varsity baseball team was crowded around in one of our rooms, just fascinated by it. I'll never forget it just because they're just a great crew of friends from high school the day before we were playing the biggest game of our life. And here's this, like, took over like hours. We just sat on the couch staring at it and wondering what the hell's going on. That was such a wild, it's so funny. So one of our friends sent us a bunch of clips of Norm Macdonald on Saturday Night Live making OJ jokes. And obviously Norm in all of them is very in your face about OJ's a murderer. This is while the trial was going on, right? but it's really funny to hear the crowd reaction, knowing what we know now. Like the crowd reaction was like half would laugh and half would be like, ooh, I don't know, too soon. It just goes to show you like how conflicted we were even then of like, is this happening? Is the juice really a murderer? Are we, like, is he getting off? Is it true? Are the facts right? Even though the facts were all pretty damn obvious that he killed his wife.
So it's
Pretty wild.
I remember the thing that happened with that one for me was it was the last time I thought my heroes were perfect. And like I was a little too young for OJ Simpson to be a huge football hero of mine, but like he was in a bunch of movies that I liked, and he was
He sure was a Naked Gun.
he was Norberg. He was great, right? So you look at it and you're like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. But just like someone coming up here and stealing shit from my office, like I think it's someone who worked here. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you do it? We were good to you. Like, I'm a relentless fucking Italian. I'm not going to let this die. I'm going to find out who did it.
Yeah. Frank's got fingerprint bags everywhere in his office. Like, if you did it, I'm just here to let you know that Frank will spend a lot of money, more than you stole from him, to find out who you are.
Yeah, and Carla's husband's a detective, and Carla feels violated. Like we don't like it. But what I remember about the OJ thing is it started off as kind of this really. You're like, of course he didn't do it, and then you like as time goes by, you're like, well, he probably did do it. And there was kind of a side of me that was like, I hope he gets away with it. And as I've gotten older, that hasn't aged well. It's kind of you look at it from the other's perspective of well. His life kind of spiraled afterwards and it feels like ultimately karma caught up with him. So there's a lot of little lessons in that thing. But what I think, Ian, like retrospectively, what I think of with OJ, it was just absolutely mesmerizing for the whole country. And like people went out as Judge Ito, who was the judge in the case.
Yeah.
Like, Judge Ito is actually on the cover of Clip Art for like 8 years. Like in the old days, you couldn't go to the internet and rip an image. You had to buy this thing called Clip Art. It came in a CD, and like Judge Ito was on the cover of it for years. Like he was just in the public consciousness for a very long time. And what it did is I think that was the moment where smart Hollywood types are like, America wants reality television. And it spawned many things. Like someone who was involved with that was the Kardashian father, who's now dead. But he was something when he came on and read, and they became famous. He died a couple years later, but it prompted a sea change, if you will, in America.
Mama Kardashian was best friends with Nicole, who died, which is I always just found was just dirty. Like you kind of know that OJ killed your best friend, and your husband is getting him off and getting him like. It was always just the whole situation was always dirty to me, and regardless. But that is not what this episode is about. Today we are talking about streaks, and I'm not talking about the long brown streaks in Frank's whitey tighty Fruit of the Loom underwear. I'm talking about putting together a habit streak.
We're gonna put this in the show notes for sure. But I haven't worn a pair of white underwear.
Your white tighty.
I haven't worn a pair of white underwear in decades.
We're putting a picture of your underwear in the show notes.
We've got the affiliate link. We have an affiliate link, of course, with Lululemon and also Tommy John, the underwear of choice, and both of your beloved hosts. Someday, Sunday Red will be in there too, Ian. I got a feeling. I got the Masters on in the background.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. So, Frank and I are both big fans of Seinfeld. Frank, do you know the episode that won TV Guide's greatest TV episode of all time?
I will imagine it is probably not the finale of Seinfeld, which was just recently parodied last week by Curb Your Enthusiasm, which was fantastic. Seinfeld goes and gets Larry David out of jail at the end, and he goes, "Nobody wants to see it. Trust me." And they pull him out of jail. But like the article was great. But this is streaks, right? Jerry Seinfeld planted a joke 25 years ago that bombed, and he resurrected it a few weeks ago. But what was the best? What's
your favorite? If you had to pick an all-time Seinfeld, what would yours be? I know that's hard for you because you love that show.
Both of them have to do with chicken. I would think my funniest Curb Your Enthusiasm was Palestinian chicken, and I think one of my favorite Seinfeld episodes of all time was Kenny Rogers Roasters. So, it's just great.
Great episode. Great episode. So the episode that won for greatest TV episode ever was The Contest. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, great, incredible. Talk
So,
about
quick
gritty, about
quick
jerking off, but they never said it.
Yeah, quick summary without being too gross about it. So it starts with George being in a diner, and George is lamenting about the fact that his mom
caught me.
walked in while he was playing with himself, while looking at like an Esquire magazine. Wasn't it like something like a Sears catalog or something stupid? Am I wrong?
I'll come up with the name in a second.
Vogue, maybe a Vogue.
Keep going. I'll pull it.
Regardless, but mom came in and hurt her back because it freaked her out so much. She's in the hospital, and so George vows to never play with himself again, and it gets a conversation going around how long could you go? Like they're saying that's impossible. It's part of being a guy, but Elaine's there, and Elaine's like. So they start talking about gambling, right? And everyone goes in $100. Who can go the longest without masturbating? And Elaine goes in, and I think didn't Elaine have to pay double because they said it's easier for you than a guy to get.
He's like, I shave my legs, and Kramer goes, not every day.
So anyway, this whole episode is about a streak. Right, it's about the contest, about streak. How long can you go? And that's kind of a reverse streak. How long can you go without doing something? And that episode has one of the most classic scenes of Seinfeld history when Kramer across from his apartment, there's a lady who keeps walking around naked in her apartment, and he leaves for a second and comes back in. They're all talking. He slams $100 on the counter, and goes, "I'm out of the counter."
He was out within 5 minutes.
I'm out. It's an amazing episode. But
already,
that whole episode is based on trying to motivate yourself to do something positive by ending a negative. Going as long as you can without doing something that they deemed as negative. That at least George did at the time because mom was in the hospital.
That's right.
And just a couple of episodes ago, Frank and I talked about a little streak that I went on. I tried to go as long as I could without eating anything out of my pantry, which is really hard for me. I love my pantry. I love all the little stupid kid snacks that are in there, and they don't lead to too many healthy decisions. But I went 75 days without eating anything out of my pantry. No peanuts, no peanut butter, no granola bars, nothing. None of the stuff that's in there because it's healthy. So that was a stop doing streak, right? Stop doing something that's bad for me streak. But there's also streaks that are do something positive for yourself every day. And the reason why we're leading with Seinfeld is this has sort of become the concept of a positive streak has become known as the Seinfeld method. So there was a young comedian who was just kind of starting out, and he found himself performing in the same club as Jerry Seinfeld. And so he went to Jerry and he said, "Hey, do you have any tips for a young comic?" Which I'm sure a million people have said with Jerry. And Seinfeld said, to be a better comic, you have to create better jokes. And the only way to create better jokes is to write every single day. And he went further than that. He said, go get yourself a big wall calendar that has the whole year on one page and hang it in a wall that you see every day. And every time you write in a day, give yourself a green check. Every time you don't write, you have to give yourself a red X. And he was like, that's it? And he's like, that's it. Once you get a chain, you won't want to break the chain. And if you keep the chain going, it'll lead to results. And I love the simplicity of this, Frankie. I love it because Seinfeld's not talking about outcomes or results. He just knows the step before the outcomes, which is always right. Stephen King's big on this. Stephen King doesn't take days off from writing. Never has. That's why he's the most prolific writer in history. He just writes every day. Like in his book on writing, that's like the number one takeaway for me in that book, which I loved that book, by the way, is don't take a day off. You write every day, build a streak. The more you write, the better you are at writing. The better you are at writing, the more creative you are. It's a flywheel that kind of builds on itself. So that is kind of the classic Seinfeld method of building a new habit.
Do you know the difference between a fad and a trend?
Tell me, Frank.
So fad is something that comes along as fashionable for a short period of time and then it disappears without a trace. That's a fad. A trend is a discernible shift in habits that's here to stay. So let's think about this in the zeitgeist, right? We started off with O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson started off as a fad. He became a trend when the chase became a court scene, and then the court scene turned into reality television. That is now a trend. A trend lasts a long period of time where a fad can come and go. In our own personal lives, we've had fads. I've got a 3-day diet. I'm going to go on a juice cleanse. Those are fads. A trend, like what I've learned, Ian's like not going to do the pantry. Your 75 is over. Have you been back to the pantry?
I've been back to the pantry.
Of course, because
But not nearly at the prolific rate that I used to be in my pantry.
So we're going to see, right? Is this a fad or is this a trend for Ian? Hopefully it's a trend, not a fad, because Ian and I have had enough fad diets in our lives. So like what I've done to get fit is I look at my daily intake of calories and my weekly intake of calories. And what I'm trying to make a trend is stay under my weekly number. So if I have a bad day or two, then I have to have a week where I know I have to balance it out, because that is not just faddish. Faddish is I never am going to have a slice of pizza, where a trend is over the course of the week, I'm going to stay at this number. So it's setting yourself for kind of successes. You use a couple of examples of people who write every day. Jerry Seinfeld in his book, Is This Anything? It's a book where he goes through from the 70s to today, all the little things he works on. He talks about explaining like he's a huge fan of Pop-Tarts, and he explains like how he wrote a Pop-Tart joke. And there's also a line there where he explains to his daughter, like, sitting down every day and writing is the hardest thing to do, but if you do it every day. So Ian used an example. There's another one that I thought was really crazy. Lady Gaga says, the one thing I do every day is I sit and I write. And I do it first thing when I wake up. I just sit down, I put down thoughts. And if I just start moving my pen, sometimes it doesn't stop. Sometimes it does. But at a minimum, I've started. And if I've started, that gets it kind of going.
Yeah, I love that. So 2018, I had just left big company. I'm now, I guess, self-employed, but you can't really call yourself self-employed when you have no customers. I was just not working. But my goal was to build a management consultancy. And to do that, I needed some kind of cachet. I needed some kind of evidence that my ideas, my thoughts were valuable, that they were worthwhile, that I was a decent enough coach. And so my thought was, I'll just go write for Forbes. And so, like a dumbass, I just started calling people from Forbes. I looked it up on LinkedIn. I put editors, Forbes, Googled it, made myself a list of names, and I went and did that. I would email them, I'd reach out, I would send direct messages, I would call. And I finally got someone on the phone who said, who are you? Do you write? Have you been published? What, and I had nothing. I'd not written anything. I said, no, I don't have any of that. She's like, well, what's your background? And I kind of told her the background. She was completely uninterested, and she should have been. All I said was I was an executive for a couple Fortune 500s. And she said, you got to go get published. You got to go build a following. And I didn't know what that meant. I said, what do you mean by following? She's like, social media, blog, something. You have to tell me that you have an audience. And I was like, I had to have sounded like such a moron. I was like asking all these questions about how to do that. And she's like, listen, I got to go. Like, good luck. Maybe you could try Quora. And she just threw that out at me. And so that is right when I went. She said, you got to go start writing. You can't just write an article for Forbes. So that's when I bought Stephen King's On Writing. And that's why that stuck with me. His big thing was write every day. And so I started writing on Quora, which is just a place where you answer questions. So it made it a little easier for me to come up with topics. But I told myself, I'm going to write an article every day. I'm going to write an article every day until I have a following. And I got a streak. And what's cool about Quora is it kind of shows you your streak. So it kind of gamifies a little bit. You've written for 18 days when you log in, right? You've written for 27 days, kind of like Peloton. You have a streak going. Congratulations. 7-day streak. Way to go.
It's amazing with technology today how sticky they make everything, right? Like they can track it, and then they can make you and then think about this, for God's sakes, and I'll let you get back to your streak. Like if you happen to log out of a poor social media site, like LinkedIn, you haven't logged in for 2 hours. Like, oh my God, the world's going to fall off its axis. But that's the importance of streaks, because like with LinkedIn or with like Facebook, they want you on there because the more you're on there, the better chances are you're going to buy something.
Oh my God. It's Frankie. So I'm glad you even brought that up. So Snapchat does this. I don't have Snapchat, but
Your kids do, unfortunately.
My kids do. And we had a big baseball tournament where we all stayed this summer. It's Cooperstown. It's the biggest Little League tournament. And you stay in a barracks, Frankie. So there's no computers, nothing. But our kids, if you don't take their phones, they'll stay up till 2 a.m. and we got a game at 8, right? So Coach Matthews would go around at night and take all the phones and put them in a lockbox and put a padlock on it so they couldn't have their phone. And one day we got rained out and some things moved. So we kind of went all day writing and giving their phones. It was like, look, we're playing baseball. And the panic these kids had, Frank, about you have to give us our phone back at 9 that night, because in 1 hour our streaks end. And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, we have streaks. We have to snap with Owen Okanek, and we have to streak with Carter, and we have to. And they're telling, and I'm not understanding. I'm like, you got to show me what you're talking about. They're like, well, we'll show you after, but give us our phones. They were shaken. They were so pissed at me that I had their phones locked up because they were going to lose all of their Snapchat streaks. And they showed me, and it gamifies it. It gives you fireworks when you hit your streak. And some of these kids had 300-day streaks going where they had Snapchatted with someone every day. So you're 100% right. That all works. But anyway, the Quora one was I think that's kind of a nasty kind of way of doing a streak, taking advantage. The Quora one was good because it's a good habit. It was encouraging. But I wrote every single day, and I did that. I just, I don't know if I'm as good as Stephen King, but in writing every day, I got better. I never became an amazing writer, but I was a lot better writer than I was when I started. And it got to a point where a Forbes editor took notice because I built a big following of people there. And that led to a Forbes contract. Just by having a positive streak, every day I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to write an article a day. Anything else that happens in my day, cool, but I'm not going to miss the streak. I'm going to do what Stephen King said.
So I'll go with a personal one first, and then we'll do a business one in a second. So in 2013, I started doing triathlon training for the first time. And you can't do triathlon training in a day. And you can't do it in a week, can't do it in a month. It ultimately, the best people in triathlon, years.
Yeah.
So what I ended up coming up with is I want to work out 5 days a week, every week for the year. So the streak is different. It's not an everyday thing. It's not an every minute thing. It's over a period of time. I want to do this 5 days. The number was 5.5 days. So I'd work out one Saturday, I'd take the next one off in the off season, and I would build it. And 2013, I was terrible at triathlons. 2014, I shaved an hour and 10 minutes off of one race. So I literally had cut my time down by 20% in a long race, a 70-mile race.
Great.
And then in the third year, I didn't have as much time to put to it, but I put so much time in over a 2-year streak. My third year time was 6 minutes slower than my second year time. I was still an hour better than the first year time. And I probably did 50% of the work because I had done work for a streak. I had the back end of that streak to build it up. We were talking yesterday about this article came out 5 hours after OJ died, and I texted Ian, there's this woman we really like. Her name is Peggy Noonan with the Wall Street Journal. And the reason she was able to write an incredibly great article in under 5 hours from concept, writing, edited, posted, it was 5 hours and 15 minutes. And the reason she did it is because she has been writing for decades, every week for decades. She's written books, she's written speeches, and those are the kind of things that start to happen. So it's like, again, we go from trend, or we go from kind of fad to trend, and trend long term becomes something that's just like the 10,000 hour skill.
I think when you know a streak is coming too, Frankie, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but if you know you want to do a streak or you're going to do something that is a regular commitment, it also can make you procrastinate a little bit starting it because, you take like us recording podcasts again. We knew that if we started, it would be stupid to start, put a couple podcasts out and then stop again for 2 months. Like we're either starting and we're going back to doing it every week and finding time in our calendar, or we shouldn't podcast. We should just wait until we are going to be committed. And I think that's what built the audience we had for the first 3 years is we were really diligent about, we didn't record every week, but we released a new podcast every week. Sometimes we would do a couple, sometimes we would do 3 to get caught up, but we were really focused on let's not go a week and break a streak. And that's how your followers get used to showing up every week. Oh, cool. I'm expecting a new episode to drop as you go through it, but it's, I find that like gamifying a streak and having fun with it, it helps create a habit that sticks. You asked me about the pantry. I could tell you I've not had a day off this year from my morning workouts. I'm like, I now feel weird if I can't get in. I've had a few where I've not gone to bed till 12:30. I'm still up at 5, getting ready to go. Like that's a trend that has really stuck with me where I don't like taking days off now. I don't feel, the cool thing about that one is I actually enjoy working out. I don't do things anymore. I'm too old to go run on a treadmill for 6 miles. I don't think it helps and I hate it. I only do workouts that I really enjoy. And I just feel weird if I don't do it now. I feel like it's not so much about my streak or my calendar. It's just, I don't feel right.
Yeah, it becomes a habit. So I'm going to pivot to something a little bit different, and it's for small businesses. When would you say you're officially a small business, Ian? Like, what's the thing that makes you a small business? Like, if I said there's one thing you could point to, and you become a business, what is it?
I mean, you're asking me to narrow down one thing.
I can do it. Spending money on marketing. When you go from a hobbyist to a pro as a business owner, the minute you start to spend money on marketing.
I was going to say once you have a consistent lead machine. So
consistent lead flow.
Right. Like, can you continue to generate new leads?
Okay. But the only way you generate new leads is either you're wildly popular on some social media site, but requires posting or doing something every day, or you're spending money to generate, right? So you're doing something every single day to generate leads.
Yeah.
There was a period in my life where I got paid to speak from stage. And when I would do that, I would always ask, by a show of hands, who spends $1,000 a month on marketing? Invariably, like in a room of people who tell me they're pros, 15, 20% of the room raises their hands. I have spent over $100,000 a month in marketing for for greater than 10 years, probably close to 15 years. So every single month I send out marketing, every month. And there's multiple sources. There's television, there's cold calls, there's postcards, I spend money on PPC that gets people to come in the door. So like if you said inside of your business, what's the one thing you've done every day? Every day I market. Every day I'm in front of people. Like if there's somebody who's motivated, I'm there. And when I change that from sporadic to daily, and I'm not even daily, I'm constant. If you want to find something, if you want to sell a piece of property in and around Richmond, you can find me 24/7, just like a 7-Eleven. I'm always open for business. And the reason I'm open for business is I'm a pro at this and I've gotten to that next level. So if there's one thing that I've done very different over time is my marketing budget and I just don't skip a day. I don't skip a minute. And if anybody ever wants to call, I answer the phone. So those are the things in a small business that you must do to go from hobbyist to pro. You've got to constantly have a lead flow. And the way you get a lead flow is you either create content or you pay, or some combination of both of those two things. Because if you stop, if that goes from trend to fad, your business goes away.
I think it applies too. If you're talking about marketing, it's the same with sales. You know, you can remember back to when you were a new home sales rep. When I was in sales with GE,
100%. Like when you talked about with your marketing presentation a few weeks ago, right? Prospecting.
You prospect, you know, and what I see happens a lot with sales folks is when they haven't made it and they're not making enough money, or they're kind of ranked low in their rankings, they grind like hell, they prospect like hell, they work like hell, and they get to a certain level and then fall back. It doesn't keep going up. It's almost like their mind, there's kind of it's like back to that satisficing conversation we had before.
That's right.
They get to a certain level and they're like, I made it. And they quit prospecting. And 3 months later, their volume's down 50%. They're not making much money anymore. And their streak is broken. It's in sales, you got to always be prospecting. Like you're hunting. Lions don't take a week off. That was my message in that Stanley Martin keynote that I gave.
Right.
Lions who take a week off die. Lions hunt every 2 to 3 days. Lions go hunt or they die. And it's the same with sales. You can't say you're a hunter, but you took a month off from hunting and you just farmed all of your old customers and went through it. You're either a hunter or you're not. And you're either generating new opportunities and reaching out and talking to people, or you're not. Right? Like look at your business, Frankie. Last week, we just talked about Frank's raising capital for a deal, which, by the way, loyal listeners, that's how good Frank and we've already fully committed that deal that we were just talking through a week ago. But if Frank doesn't do that in a real estate business, generate new capital, his business goes away. Like he has to always be thinking not just about leads and how do I find new homes, how do I raise capital? Because if you want to grow bigger and bigger and bigger, you run out of your own cash to do it.
So I think this is worth talking about here. Jerry Seinfeld's a comedian. He doesn't go on stage every night. He writes jokes every night. Like every single day he sits and writes, but he doesn't always perform. In my business, I have to market every single day. I don't have to raise capital every single day. But what I do when I do raise capital is I need to perform and I need to tell a story around it. The core part of my business is marketing. If I don't have deals, I have nothing to fund. If I don't have deals, I have no need for staff. So what you have to get down to is what is the core fundamental thing you have to do every day? What's the core fundamental thing maybe you do weekly? What's the core fundamental thing maybe you do monthly? Or what's the core fundamental thing you do quarterly or annually? And it breaks into those categories. You don't have to do everything every day, but almost everything in your business needs a rhythm or it needs a process. So like as an example, I don't have a sales meeting every day that's 3 hours. I have a sales meeting every morning, Monday through Friday, that's 15 minutes with the exception of Monday, and we just talk about calibration. But that's how I've been able to replace staff. My construction meeting isn't every day. They have it once a week, but that gets disseminated out. So I think what really is important is you don't necessarily have to do everything daily unless it's a core fundamental. But what you need is you do need a streak and you need a time frame. You need to think those things through. And what you might get to, like, let's think about management, Ian. You teach how to become a better manager. When you are a performer, you do that every day. If you're building houses, if you're a coder, an engineer, like you do those things daily. But then when you move into a management role, you don't touch those same things daily. So your rhythms are different. So the role that you used to have and the role that you have now, you need slightly different things. Your check-in points are different. What you do every day in that new role is going to be different than the last role. And what usually happens is there's a check-in point to that last role. Think about if you build a hugely successful business. Like think of someone like a Steve Jobs, who was in the garage to managing one of the biggest companies in the world. He would touch different things in different ways over time, but he knew how to do those things. So it's like, if it makes sense, you always need rhythms to be successful, but those rhythms can change. And the daily stuff should change over time, especially if you elevate or get into new roles. And if you want to promote other people to help you, your role has to change, but then they have to build some rhythms.
And I think there's certain streaks, Frankie, that you have to do. Like it's like oxygen, right? Breathing you and I have an undefeated streak of breathing.
That's
like
right.
Oxygen every day. We drink water every day. We eat every day. We have a really good streak going.
People always say that, and they're like, what's the one thing you can't live without? And they're like, water, food. Well, good luck without oxygen. Like You can live without food, or you can live without water for days, but you can't live without oxygen for more than a few minutes.
There's some things you got to do. I think the impressive streaks are the ones, Frankie, are the things that are important to your business or important to whatever habit you're trying to build, but they're not urgent.
That's right.
If you don't do it for a month, maybe no one will notice in the short term, but it's going to catch up to you, right?
That's right.
If you have an unhealthy eating habit for a month, you're not going to die from it, right? But if you stack that too long, you're in trouble. And I think that whole concept of important but not urgent habits, when we talk about writing, right? If I didn't write every day, nothing was going to happen to me, right? But I wasn't going to get to my goal. And I certainly was. If I'd have been sporadic, I wouldn't have been as good at writing as I got by grinding it every day. And it's the same, I think, a little bit with you with lead generation, with marketing. You could take some time off on it. You could take a couple weeks off. You could you're talking about business owners all over the place that only put 10% of the money into it that you do. They probably are sporadic and try to find other ways to do it, but those businesses don't go anywhere. They don't consistently grow.
One of the coolest things for me that has to do with the Seinfeld method and has to do with kind of just doing things over time and building a streak, it's Ian's dad. So for those of us that know Ian and know him well, Ian's dad passed away at the end Q4 of 2022. But Ian's dad had been a baseball card collector. And one of the reasons Ian and I both got back into baseball cards since we were kids is Ian started talking about his dad's cards to me. And we started this whole episode talking about cards. Well, his dad had kind of led a lot of people in going after signatures. And what his dad did is he would send out a SAS, a self-addressed stamped envelope to these people with cards in it. And he would send out 5 to 15 of these a day. And he would send them all around the country to people that used to play baseball. Ian showed me something like 15 months after his dad died. He goes, you're never going to believe this. And he held this up. And there were envelopes still coming home with signed cards in it, because every single day he'd send out 5 to 15 for 2 decades. And one of them, like when Ian kind of went back and reverse engineered it, he's like, oh my God, my dad sent this out like 3 years ago. And the guy just sent it back, because you never know how long your tail is on marketing. So because he had a habit, like literally, I'm sure his mom still looks at these things and kind of has this nostalgic reaction, because her husband is still touching the world, because he was so dedicated and disciplined in doing something that even almost 2 years after he's gone, there's still results coming in because of what he did with a daily streak.
Yeah, someone will come in with a letter like, hey, dear Barry, really sorry it took me so long. I moved addresses. Here's my new address if you ever want it. Like, you get like a little note with some of them. They're really cute. It's but no, you're right. His collection is really, really impressive, and that's just 50 years of putting a little bit of time in every day. That's why it's so organized. That's why it's organized the way it is. It's easy for me to kind of find things looking around, because he just, when he wasn't working, that was his hobby. He would put a little time in every day. But I think on the other side of it, Frankie, we talked about the downside with the Snapchat and the kids. Streaks can also have negative consequences a little bit.
Sure.
Because you can have burnout, so here's how I used to see that. I don't know if you ever saw this happen. a lot of big companies will run a sales contest, right? And the contest will have some like daily component to it, or where you're just grinding hard every day for some goal. And I used to see all the time, Frank, sales. There would be like a certain percentage of sales reps who would make President's Club with just unreal numbers, like performance that would blow your mind, and completely fall apart to start. Like you turn around in April and they went from being ranked third in the company to being ranked 113th, like in 4 months. And it's almost like that feeling of I made it and I can just relax. Like the streak got me here. It's why you hear a lot of coaches say it's so much harder to win a second championship, because everyone feels like they've made it. They relax. They're no longer hunting. They're the hunted. So a streak can have negative consequences in that you can get burnout and go completely opposite, right? That's why a lot of these like starvation diets are just stupid, because they make you just yearn for something that you feel like you're missing. It's a lot easier to just build a healthy habit than something you don't enjoy.
So fads can be stupid, but trends typically aren't, because they weather the test of time. So one of our favorite guys, his big moments coming up in about 3 weeks, is Warren Buffett. I asked you this question before, but I don't know if you recall it. Do you remember what percentage of Warren Buffett's wealth he's accumulated after the age of 65?
Ooh, I remember us talking about after 40. Like at 40 years old, he was only worth like 10 million. I remember you telling me that stat. Because you were trying to make the point that we got a lot of runway left if we can do what he did. But I don't know. After 65, I'm going to say 2/3.
66%. After
Whoa,
65.
nailed it.
No. That's what you're saying. Your submission is 66%.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. The real answer is 97% of his wealth he's accumulated after the age of 65. So
he's got more Apple today than he had total everything in 65.
But the reason this is important is this: he has a streak, he's got a streak. His streak is buying companies and holding them, and he's been doing it every single day for 6 or 7 decades. So what happens is this with streaks or trends is if they continue, it becomes a skill or it becomes something that's inherent inside of you. And if you do the right things, if you're building the right tools, I referenced Peggy Noonan earlier, Jerry Seinfeld. Like Jerry Seinfeld can stand up and riff because he's written so many things. The article that I was so impressed about with Peggy Noonan, she probably writes every day and takes notes every day and files things away, because every now and again something current event happens and she wants to write about it, but she's done all the work before. So what I think really kind of happens with streaks and trends is they have long tails. And if you pay attention and do it the right way and you work towards something that's congruent with what you're doing every single day, that's where there's the compounded effect becomes huge. Stephen King writes every day. He's put out his first book. How many books does he have now? Like 150, 200 books? I don't even know. It's some asinine number of books.
Like every 2.5 months, he's pulling out a new book. It's crazy.
It's insane. But the only way you do that is you start with one. He had to start a streak. It's funny that we're talking about this today because I had a conversation with our team on Monday and we talked about kind of some sayings like many hands make light work. Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't solve these things one at a time. What you have to do is
never trust a big butt and a smile. Belle Biv DeVoe.
But you have to get those things kind of moving in the right direction. But once they move in the right directions, the rewards can be enormous.
Yeah, 100%. I don't have anything else. That was a really good wrap up on your part, Frankie. Great job showing up. We now have a streak of 3 people. So let's keep this energy going. Frank, get some goddamn cameras and maybe
we also have a streak. We have another streak we can't leave out, Ian. We have a streak of grand larceny 2 days this week. 2 days out of 6. It's incredible.
I hope that's a streak you break,
Have
brother.
you been the subject of grand larceny?
I hope that's a streak you break. Let's get some cameras in that office, my man.
Carlos out buying him as we speak.
Yep. See ya, homie.
Good talking to you. See you, bro.
If you like what you just heard, and judging by the viewership numbers, you did, hit that follow button and leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show. And it lets Frankie and I know that, a few people are listening to this.